I always believed we were a normal family. Not perfect, of course, but loving, warm, stable. My dad, Javier Morales, was the kind of man who brought home pastries on Sundays, who called me mi princesa, even when I was too old for it. He worked in finance, long hours, business trips to Madrid or Barcelona now and then, but he always made it home for birthdays. He always hugged my mother when he walked through the door. We lived in Valencia, in a modest but cozy apartment near the Turia Gardens. I'm an only child, and for most of my life, it felt like the three of us were this little, unshakable triangle. Until one Thursday afternoon in October. I had just come home from my university. I'm in my final year studying architecture, and I was midway through microwaving leftover paella when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something about the timing, the silence in the room, the way the sun hit the tiles. I picked it up. Hola? The voice on the other end paused. Then said, in a tone both hesitant and oddly familiar. Is this Lucia Morales? Yes, who's this? Another pause. Then she said, I think, we might be sisters. My whole body froze. I actually laughed, that awkward, confused kind of laugh when your brain hasn't caught up yet. I'm sorry, what? My name is Isabel, and I think we share the same father. Javier Morales. From Valencia? I didn't speak. I couldn't. The line crackled slightly. She spoke again. I know this is a shock. It was for me, too. But I think we should talk. I hung up. Not because I didn't want to know, but because part of me already did. Deep down, something had shifted. Something ancient. Something that made sense in a way I didn't want it to. I sat there for hours. My lunch went cold. My thoughts ran wild. Had she gotten the wrong Javier Morales? It's not that uncommon a name. Was this a scam? Or worse, was it real? That night, my father came home at the usual time. My mother kissed him on the cheek, and he smiled the same way he always did. And I watched him. Studied him. For the first time in my life, I noticed how calculated his warmth was. Like a performance. At dinner, he asked how my studio critique went. I answered mechanically. He complimented the wine. My mother laughed. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal. I didn't tell them about the call. Not yet. Because suddenly, I needed to know more. Who was Isabel? How did she find me? What did she know about my father that I didn't? I barely slept that night. I kept staring at the ceiling, going over every business trip, every missed holiday, every long phone call he took in the other room. Was it really all work? Or had my father been hiding something, or someone, for my entire life? The next morning, I messaged Isabel. If this isn't a joke, meet me. Tomorrow. Noon. Café Riu, in El Carmen. She responded almost instantly. I'll be there. And just like that, the life I thought I had, began to unravel. I got to Café Riu 10 minutes early. It's one of those quiet spots tucked away in El Carmen, with mosaic tiled tables and potted plants crowding the window ledges. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly spilled my espresso. I didn't know what to expect. But when Isabel walked in, I knew immediately who she was. She looked like me. Not exactly, she was taller, thinner, wore darker lipstick, but there was something undeniable. The same almond-shaped eyes, the same sharp cheekbones we both must have gotten from him. She hesitated when she saw me, then smiled nervously. Lucia? I nodded. Isabel? She sat down slowly, her fingers clenched around her bag like it was keeping her upright. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, I didn't mean to scare you. I just didn't know how else to reach you. I swallowed hard. Just tell me what you know. So she did. Her story was shocking and painfully familiar. She grew up in Castellon, just an hour north of Valencia. Her mother, Elena, met Javier Morales at a business seminar. He told her he was recently divorced and traveling frequently for work. For years, he visited on weekends, holidays, birthdays. He was never just some guy. He was present. Her mother's partner. Her father. They had a quiet, stable life. She said he even kept a drawer at their house. A toothbrush. Cologne. He was affectionate. Attentive. Reliable. He was, in every way that mattered, a father. I wanted to scream. To run. To demand proof. But instead, I asked the one question I hadn't dared to until then. Does he still come around? She looked down. No. Not since last year. He said work was too demanding. He still calls sometimes, but less and less. A lump formed in my throat. How old are you? 23, she said quietly. I was born in June. I was born that October. Just 4 months apart. 4 months. That meant he didn't just cheat on my mother, he was with both women at the same time. Building 2 families, parallel and perfectly hidden. 1 weekend here. 1 weekend there. 2 homes. 2 daughters. 2 lives. I leaned back, my heart pounding in my chest. You said he told your mom he was divorced? She nodded. He even brought papers once. But now I think they were fake. Of course they were, I whispered, the horror finally settling in. He's still married to my mother. He never left. I couldn't even feel the floor under my feet anymore. It was like my entire identity had been ripped out from under me. Isabel reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. Him. Smiling. Holding her as a baby. A hand resting on her mother's shoulder. A home in the background, modest, but filled with warmth. And I realized then, he didn't just lie. He lived the lie. There were toothbrushes, birthdays, lullabies, whole memories I'd never seen. Versions of my father that never belonged to me. I stood up, pacing. Does my mother know? I asked. Isabel shook her head. I don't think so. Elena always believed he was honest. She only started questioning things when he stopped visiting. She tried calling his office, but she got stonewalled. And suddenly, I understood. He was slowly cutting Isabel and her mother out. Distancing. Erasing them. And if I hadn't answered that call, he might have succeeded. I sat back down, breathing hard. I need to find out how long this has been going on. Isabel bit her lip. I can help. I kept some things. Letters. Receipts. Old phone bills. I stared at her. This stranger. My sister. We didn't share a childhood. We didn't fight over toys or steal clothes or laugh in the back seat of a car. But we shared a father. And he had lied to both of us. Okay, I said quietly. Let's find out who he really is. I didn't tell my parents where I was going. I said I had a group project in Benicassim, technically true. That's where Isabel lived with her mother. A quiet coastal town, about an hour and a half north of Valencia, known for its beaches and whitewashed houses. The kind of place my dad said he hated, too sleepy, too small. Turns out, he had a home there. A whole life. When Isabel and I arrived at her house, I paused at the gate. It was simple, 1 story, with ivy crawling over the fence and ceramic wind chimes on the porch. Nothing flashy. Just, lived in. Familiar in that way only time makes things familiar. Are you sure your mom's okay with me being here? I asked. Isabel nodded. She's nervous. But she wants to meet you. I followed her up the path, my heart hammering. The door opened before we knocked. Elena was in her late 40s. Beautiful, in that understated Spanish way, sun-warmed skin, kind eyes, hair tied loosely behind her head. She froze when she saw me. I don't know what she expected, but I think it hurt, how much I looked like him. "Hola, Lucia," she said, her voice tight. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled like rosemary and lemon cleaner. There were framed photos on the shelves, of Isabel, mostly. But also him. My father. Laughing. Cooking. Opening presents. Holding a tiny dog I never knew existed. I sat stiffly on the couch while Elena brought out tea, her hands trembling slightly. "We never knew about you," she said finally. "I need you to know that. He told me he was divorced." I believed him. For 20 years. I didn't know what to say. There was no one here to blame but the man we both thought we knew. Isabel pulled out a dusty shoebox from the hallway. Inside were receipts, notes, letters. All dated. All organized. Hotel bookings. Airline stubs from Valencia to Madrid, but the timestamps lined up with weekends he said he was on site at client offices. Photos of birthdays, Christmases. Even a little drawing Isabel made as a child, Para Papa, written in crayon at the top, with a scribbly family of 3. He'd folded it and kept it in his wallet. She had found it when he left it behind one visit. Each item was a punch to the gut. Proof. Tangible proof that my father had been two people for over 2 decades. I flipped through a calendar from 2016. On October 14th, my birthday, he'd written. Valencia, Lucia. 17. The next day, October 15th. Benicassim, Isabel's recital. He celebrated me, kissed my forehead, then drove north to do it all again. There weren't enough words to describe the nausea building in my stomach. "I thought he loved us," I whispered. Elena looked down. "He probably did. But not enough to tell the truth." The rest of the day passed in a blur. They showed me the park where he used to take Isabel when she was little. The grocery store where they'd bump into neighbors. The restaurant by the pier where he'd order arroz a banda and say he hated paella, even though we made it every Sunday. He hadn't just lied. He'd duplicated his life. And I realized, he wasn't living with guilt. He was living with systems. Routines. Perfect timing. Lies polished so well they passed for facts. That night, back in my room in Valencia, I sat in the dark scrolling through Isabel's old photos on Instagram. She had posted one 3 years ago. Papa teaching me to drive. We almost hit a cat but he didn't even blink, face with tears of joy. It was the same month he taught me how to parallel park in our neighborhood, yelling izquierda, while sipping café con leche in a to-go cup. How had he done it? How had he smiled at both of us like we were his entire world? I didn't cry. Not yet. I just lay there thinking, if he lied about this, what else do I not know? I had to confront him. Not for revenge. Not even for answers, really. But because I couldn't keep living someone else's lie. I waited until Sunday. He always made it home by 7 p.m. on Sundays. Like clockwork. My mother would pour him a glass of Tinto, they'd watch a movie, and I'd usually be in my room pretending not to hear them laugh. But that night, I didn't hide. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off except for the low amber of the hallway lamp. At 7:04, the door opened. I heard the shuffle of his keys. His voice. "Hola, ¿dónde están mis chicas?" I didn't answer. I just watched as he walked into the kitchen and saw me, sitting there, silent. He froze. "Lucia, ¿estás bien?" I looked at him like I didn't recognize him. Like he was some stranger who'd wandered into my house wearing my father's skin. "Where were you last weekend?" I asked. His face flickered, just for a second. He adjusted his blazer. In Madrid. Client presentation. I stood up slowly and walked to the drawer where we kept receipts and warranties. I pulled out the shoebox Isabel gave me. Sat it on the table. He didn't move. I opened it. Pulled out one photo. Him, holding Isabel on her 5th birthday, balloons in the background, his tie crooked, same one I remembered from my 5th birthday. I placed it on the table between us. He didn't look away. I placed a second photo beside it. Him and Elena. Holding hands outside a small red car. Then a hotel receipt. A necklace receipt from a boutique in Benicassim. A receipt dated the same day he missed my graduation dinner. His mouth parted slightly. Lucia. I raised my hand. Don't lie. Just don't. The silence between us was so thick, I could barely breathe. He sat down. I was going to tell you, he said, voice cracking. Eventually. No, I snapped. You weren't. You were going to wait me out. Wait until I moved out, got married, drifted. Then you'd disappear from both our lives like a ghost. He rubbed his eyes. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I slammed my palm on the table. You had 2 lives. And you made both of us think we were your only one. He stared at me for a long time. Then sighed. I loved you both. No, I said. You used us both. And you made us think love looked like lies wrapped in affection. His face softened. Lucia. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. Every time you said you were busy. Every time you told me you were proud. You were saying the same thing to another daughter. Buying the same birthday cards. Taking the same father-daughter selfies. Did we mean anything to you, or were we just duplicates? His eyes began to water. I was young when it started. Elena wasn't supposed to stay in my life. But then she got pregnant, and I didn't know how to leave either of you. So you didn't. I spat. You stayed. You kept both. Like we were 2 houses you could visit when you got bored. He opened his mouth. Closed it. There was nothing left to say. I leaned in, my voice lower now. You know the worst part? You were good at it. So good. You didn't miss birthdays. You gave advice. You cried when my abuela died. You played the perfect dad. And that scares me more than the lie. He wiped a tear, shaking. Please don't tell your mother. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man not afraid of what he'd done, but of being caught. That was all I needed to know. I stood up. I won't tell her. Not yet. He looked relieved. Then I added, but only because when she finds out. I want it to come from you. And if you don't tell her by the end of the week, I will. He didn't argue. Didn't beg. He just nodded, as if a small part of him knew this moment would come. I walked past him, grabbed my coat, and left. I didn't cry until I hit the elevator. And once I started, I couldn't stop. Because nothing hurt more than realizing that the man who raised you, the man who kissed your forehead every night, was just playing a part. He told her on a Thursday. I didn't see it happen. I didn't need to. I knew from the silence. My mother, Carmen, is not the kind of woman who breaks easily. She teaches high school literature, reads Neruda and Garcia Marquez like scripture, and has always had a steel in her spine that kept our family grounded. She doesn't cry in public. She doesn't raise her voice. But that Thursday evening, the apartment felt like a grave. I came home to find her sitting at the dining table, still in her work clothes, a single glass of wine untouched in front of her. She looked up at me, eyes blank, and said just one thing. He told me everything. I sat down across from her, my chest tight. She didn't ask questions. Didn't scream. She just began talking, quietly, like someone narrating a dream they haven't woken from yet. 20 years. 20 years of business trips and weekend conferences and last-minute dinners with clients. 20 years of defending him when people said he worked too much. When you asked why he always missed your school plays, I told you he was providing for us. Her voice cracked. I was covering for a man who was living a second life. While I was paying bills and planning Christmas, he was raising another daughter. I reached across the table, but she pulled her hand back. Lucia, how long have you known? I froze. A week. I swear. I didn't want to believe it. I met her, Isabel. She's real. She's nice. She didn't know either. My mother nodded slowly. Then, for the first time in my life, she cried. Not dramatic sobs. Just tears, silently pouring down her cheeks while she stared ahead like the world had shifted and she hadn't moved with it. I gave him my youth, she whispered. My trust. I built this home with him, brick by brick. And he was, what? Visiting another house the next town over? I didn't have answers. I didn't even have anger left. We sat there like two women shipwrecked by the same wave. One who had lost her marriage, the other her childhood. Later that night, my father came home. I heard the door open, and then slam shut again. He didn't say a word. Just packed a single bag and left. There was no goodbye. No apology. And that told me everything. The fallout didn't end there. My aunt, my mother's sister, found out 2 days later and called him a coward who didn't even earn his surname. My abuela stopped answering his calls entirely. And people in our building noticed. The missing car. The quiet dinners. The absence. You'd be surprised how quickly a lie like his unravels when it finally breaks the surface. I didn't see him again for weeks. Isabel kept texting. She felt guilty, even though none of it was her fault. I told her the truth, that we were both victims of the same betrayal. That we didn't need to carry his shame. But my mother, she didn't bounce back. Not right away. She stopped reading. She called in sick to work. She started cooking meals and forgetting to eat them. The woman who once ran the household like a queen now drifted from room to room like a ghost. And I took on the quiet tasks. Grocery shopping. Managing the bills. Picking up dry cleaning. Small things to keep the world from collapsing around us completely. It felt like I was parenting my own parent. And deep down, I hated that he had done this. Not just the affair. Not the lies. But the fact that he left the mess behind, like it was nothing. We didn't deserve that. Neither of us. And still, part of me hoped he'd reach out. Say something. Apologize. Ask to talk. But the days stretched into weeks. And the silence became its own kind of answer. I stopped waiting for an apology. There was no final message. No voice note. No letter. Just silence, the same kind he used to build his lie. At first, that hurt more than anything. The idea that after everything, 22 years of being his daughter, he couldn't even face me as a man. He just vanished. But after a while, the silence became a gift. Without his noise, without his shadow, I could hear myself again. I started doing something I hadn't done in months. I designed sketches, models, concepts. I poured my heartbreak into drafting tables and tracing paper. I stayed late at the university studio, headphones in, head down, building worlds that made more sense than the one I was living in. My professors noticed. So did my mentor, Professor Bullen, an older architect who once said I thought in texture. She called me into her office one afternoon, gently closed the door, and said, "Whatever pain you're carrying, it's making your work honest. Don't let it harden you. Let it hone you." I held on to those words like armor. Back home, things were slow. My mother was healing, but quietly. She returned to work. Stopped crying at the dinner table. She even started rereading her favorite book, Love in the Time of Cholera. I'd find it open beside her tea at night. One morning, she said, "I think I want to move." I blinked. What? This apartment, it's full of ghosts. I looked around. I knew exactly what she meant. Every wall held a memory, and a lie. So we did something that terrified and freed us both. We started looking for a new place. Not far. Just enough to leave the echo behind. And then, almost by accident, I saw a small listing in Rizafa, my favorite neighborhood, full of color and life and energy. The kind of place where people danced in the streets during Phallus and kids rode bikes through murals. We visited it together. A top-floor walk-up with worn tiles and big windows and too much sunlight. It wasn't perfect. But it was ours. The day we moved in, I stood in the empty living room and took a deep breath. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel heavy. I felt clear. Isabel and I still talked, not every day, but often. We sent memes, song links, updates about school. We never said sisters out loud, but we were slowly becoming something close. She came to Valencia once, met my mother briefly. It was tense, polite. But no fireworks. Just reality settling into place. One day, Isabel asked me, "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about everything, the lies, the birthdays missed, the nights I cried for a man who didn't even try to fight for us. Then I said, "No. But I think I'll stop needing to." Forgiveness, I realized, isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's about releasing yourself from their grip. And that's what I chose. Peace. Not because he deserved it. But because I did. It's strange how the world doesn't stop when your own shatters. The buses keep running. People still laugh in cafes. The sun still rises over the rooftops like it doesn't know anything's changed. But I changed. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just, slowly. Like a bruise fading under skin. Some days, I still wondered what he was doing. If he ever thought about us. If he missed the way my mother used to leave him handwritten notes on the fridge. If he remembered the way I hugged him after I got accepted to university. But those thoughts came less and less. Because my life started to fill again, with real things. Honest things. I began volunteering at an after-school program for kids who needed help with their art portfolios. Most of them were shy, unsure, just like I used to be. I saw pieces of myself in their anxious eyes, their trembling lines. Helping them find their voice helped me reclaim mine. One evening, I stayed back to clean up and noticed a girl had left a crumpled sketch behind. It was a messy drawing of her and her dad, stick figures, holding ice cream cones. She'd written, "Te quiero, Papa." I stared at it for a long time. And to my surprise, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I knew exactly what that girl felt, the deep, blind love we give our fathers without question. And I also knew what it felt like to lose that, and live. At home, my mother hung a new painting above our dining table. It wasn't expensive or anything. Just a small, abstract piece, all blues and rust orange brush strokes, but it felt like something new. Something chosen. She started leaving the windows open more. She started humming while making tea. One night, as we were finishing dinner, she looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you, Lucia. You didn't let him break you." I didn't reply. I just reached for her hand and held it. We didn't talk about him much after that. Not because we were pretending he never existed. But because we had moved on. Some days I still carried the ache, like phantom weight on my chest. Some memories still stung. But they didn't define me anymore. I wasn't the daughter of the man with two families. I was just Lucia. An architecture student. A sister. A daughter, to a woman who never stopped showing up, even when everything else collapsed. I was a girl who'd been broken, and rebuilt. Not into the same version of myself. But into someone wiser. Stronger. Clearer. And that, I've learned, is what healing really looks like. Not a clean slate. Not forgetting. Just choosing peace every day. Even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Especially then.